Hello and welcome back. Hands up how many of you out there have tried to buy a Springbank or a Longrow, Hazelburn or a Kilkerran? How many of you actually managed to find one and were successful? I'm guessing that most of you, like myself, if you've tried, you've probably either had to pay absolutely through the nose prices at secondary market, or you've been disappointed because there's a serious problem with Springbank availability at the moment, and that's probably down to a multitude of factors. But the fact is that Springbank, as much as everyone loves it, it's becoming impossible to buy. Whenever it does go on sale, it sells out immediately, and you're getting a lot of flippers latching onto this popularity and making the problem even worse. So I think that us in the Whisky YouTube community and whisky drinkers in general, we need to start looking at some sensible, affordable, hopefully available alternatives to some of these Springbank bottlings. And that's where this one comes in. This is a bottle that I didn't intend to buy. I went to a local bottle shop and they had this one. And anyone that's been watching my videos for a while, you're going to know that I have a real soft spot for Highland Park. It's one of the first distilleries that I got really excited about and kind of fell in love with. And over the years, I've kind of fallen in and out of love with Highland Park at several points. But it's a distillery that I have fond memories of, and it's one that I always keep going back to. I really do like their house style, and I think that they can make incredibly good whiskey. So this Highland Park in particular, apologies from myself that I am late to the party in reviewing this one, because this one I believe it was released about 3 or 4 years ago and it was a limited release. You can still find this if you look hard enough. It is still available. Another reason, apart from the fact that I love Highland Park as to why I bought this bottle, is because it's been recommended to me, I think more than once, by one of my subscribers, someone that you've probably all seen in the comments section on my videos and other people's. It's Welsh Toro. So Welsh Toro, thank you for that recommendation on this one, and if it turns out to be crap, we can all blame him. I'm sure that's not going to happen though. So Highland Park Twisted Tattoo, 16-year-old, so it's got an age statement, that's always a good sign. Highland Park, they have annoyed me a little bit lately that it seems like you either get an age statement and it's very expensive, or you get a good ABV and no age statement, that you always lose something. It's like good, fast or cheap, pick any two of the three. You can't have everything. I often feel like that's the case when you're looking at Highland Park releases. But with this one we've got a 16-year-old age statement. It's 46.7% ABV. If you look on the back label, it actually says natural cask driven colour, so no colouring added to this one. It comes in the standard Highland Park dark glass. I think this is some sort of coating on here, but dark glass. I am a fan of dark glass, apart from the fact that it makes it annoying to see how much you've got, protects it from the light, and it means that there's just no point in adding colouring, because that's not a factor in whether you buy this whiskey. By the time you see the colour, you've already made your purchase, so it takes the temptation away. Comes with your standard sort of twist and pull to open cork stopper, as Highland Park are using on a lot of their bottles now. I know some people don't like that. I personally think that it's a nice touch, doesn't hurt. And looking at the box and the label, there's actually a lot of details on this one. We know that this whiskey is a limited edition of casks married together in September 2018 and filtered at 4 degrees. So it's kind of semi-chill filtered, sadly, but not as heavily chill filtered as it could have been. Looking at the label that you get in the box for this one, something else I just want to point out that I really like. There's a little leaflet in here with the Highland Park range. So you've got the standard 12-year-old, Valknut, the 18-year-old, Viking Pride, and 3 travel retail exclusives there, Spirit of the Bear, Loyalty of the Wolf, Wings of the Eagle. And what I just wanted to mention is on all of these, even going down to the 40% basic 12-year-old, on all of them it says natural cask driven colour, no additives, on all 6 of those. So it looks like Highland Park, this confirmed what probably a lot of you have heard, they have gone no colouring added on the entire range, which, hats off to Highland Park, brilliant job. Going back to this whiskey though, and a lot of the details, if you do manage to find this and you haven't got the box, I'll just hold this up so you can see the details there. you can hit pause and read those hopefully. But details on the box for this whiskey in particular, it is partially finished in Rioja wine casks. So Rioja, however you want to pronounce that, kind of potato, tomato. I don't really care about pronunciation that much. But it's finished in that type of wine cask. Any wine drinkers out there will know that you can get red Rioja and white Rioja. Doesn't actually say if it's red or white on this one. The colour of this whiskey is not too intense, so possible that they used some or all white Rioja in this one, but I would guess from the taste it probably is red. But the level of detail that they give you on the casks on this one is really quite impressive from Highland Park. So we know that this is a vatting of two different types of cask. You've got 153 casks laid down between the year 2000 and 2001, filled into 220 litre first fill Rioja wine casks in January and March 2016. Even tells you the ABVs, and if you want to know the full details you can go back and hit pause on this video. And so those 153 casks, it kind of seems like they're leading us to believe that they were probably bourbon casks or hogsheads, 153 of them, and that whiskey was finished in these first fill Rioja casks between 2016 and 2018. So you've basically got around about 16-year-old whiskey that's had about a 2-year finishing, or it's kind of like a double maturation at that point because it's been in there for so long. 2 years in these first fill Rioja casks, and then those 153 Rioja finished casks are married with 70 first fill bourbon casks. And those first fill bourbon casks were filled in 1999 at strengths of between 63.6 and 63.7. So lots and lots of details there. I really like that. I'm sure that a lot of you do. You wouldn't be watching a video about a whiskey review if you weren't a whiskey geek. I know I am. And we love details. Highland Park, if you're watching, thank you for all of the information. Please keep doing that. So, Highland Park finished in Rioja red wine casks. A large part of why I bought this and why I was talking about Springbank earlier is that one of the popular releases from the Springbank group is Longrow Red. People go absolutely crazy for it, and it's good stuff. I think that the quality does vary over the years. Sometimes you get very, very good batches where they're always in some sort of red wine cask of various kinds. Sometimes it goes really well with a Longrow Spirit and that Longrow Springbank peat. Sometimes it doesn't. I think some batches have not been great. But as I mentioned, Springbank and Longrow are just becoming impossible to get hold of now, and when you can get them, they're often at incredibly inflated prices. So I thought that Highland Park's a distillery that I really like, and because it's got that red wine cask on it, probably red wine, I thought maybe this will be a suitable alternative to the Longrow Red that I haven't been able to get for a long time. So Highland Park Twisted Tattoo 16-year-old on the nose. Now, one of the things that I was worried about with this whiskey, and the reason, if I'm honest, why I didn't buy it when it was first recommended to me, is because I find that a lot of whiskies that are finished in red wine cask, it covers up the house style. You can't tell where the whiskey is from anymore. You lose a lot of the character of the peat if it is there, and a lot of the character of the barley, and the character that you get from the stills and the maturation. It's all covered up because red wine can be very heavy-handed, and in my opinion it can be quite destructive to a whiskey, and that's absolutely not the case with this one. Nosing this, you can straight away tell that it is a Highland Park whiskey. You're getting lots of that lovely gentle heather honey peat notes. Toffee apples is always a note that I get in Highland Parks, but along with all that house style, you're getting some lovely red fruit and strawberries dipped in milk chocolate notes coming through, obviously from that Rioja cask. Lovely full-bodied red wine notes, and a lovely earthy dry peat with a little hint of menthol mintiness. And I find that one really interesting. It seems like The red wine and the peat have combined to be slightly more medicinal than I'd expect from either one of them on its own. So that's a sign of a really well-made whiskey when you start to get these tertiary flavours coming through that are a combination of more than one element rather than a direct influence of any one thing. I also think that there's quite a chocolatiness, a little bit of a spiciness, and quite a medicinal note to this one. Surprisingly medicinal for a Highland Park, getting a little bit of a note of cough syrup, getting some wine gums, sort of wine gum jelly sweet notes coming through, which again I think is from that red wine. After a while you start to get some lovely orangey maltiness coming through from the base spirit, and I think that there's definitely evidence of this being a marriage between red wine finished whiskey married with full-term bourbon matured whiskey, because you're getting some lovely sweet vanilla caramel bourbon cask notes. So that is what I would call an incredibly good, pretty surprisingly complex nose for a whiskey that's been finished in red wine cask. Let's see how it tastes. As per the nose, really pleasantly surprised that this is so typically Highland Park through and through. You really haven't lost much at all of that Highland Park house style. It's typically Highland Park, caramel, toffee apple, slightly spicy, with that toasty heather honey Highland Park peat. Slightly spicy and peppery, which I think is probably a lot of that coming through from those wine casks. Dark fruits, rich orangey maltiness showing good age. Was slightly surprised that you're getting, what me personally, I'm finding a little bit of bitterness on the late palate of this one. And to start with, and I think it's probably faded as I've got some air to this bottle, but to start with I wondered if that was maybe a little bit of a hint of sulphur, a little bit of that extreme bitterness that you get from some sulphur contamination, which is something that I've had in Highland Park before. It's one of the reasons why I went off Highland Park for a lot of time. But I think that bitterness that I'm getting, that I'm detecting on the late palate of this one, I think it's probably more likely some tannins coming through from those red wine casks rather than actual sulphur. But either way, it's not there, it's not present enough that it spoils this whiskey. It's just another little bit of character. Going to have one more sip and look at the finish. Beautiful, natural looking colour. About what you'd expect for a 16-year-old whiskey with that wine treatment. Really wonderful mouthfeel as well. Even though this is semi-chill filtered, I think that the ABV and the robustness of the spirit means that you're getting a really good mouthfeel, really good experience on the palate. As for the finish, it's, I'm going to say lingering, but slightly simple. I think you're getting lots of red wine influence on the late palate and the finish. Kind of after you swallow the whiskey, it really becomes more about the red wine than it did on the palate. And I think that the finish is slightly shorter than expected. I think that the kind of things that always put me off a red wine finished whiskey, and that's lack of complexity, lack of balance, and then it all becomes a little bit more like drinking a 40-50% red wine rather than whiskey which has had a cask treatment. That really isn't something that's happened to this whiskey, except on the finish. I think that the finish does suffer probably from that red wine treatment, in the terms that it makes the finish slightly shorter and slightly simpler than it probably could have been. But all in all, that's a minor criticism, because I think that the nose of this whiskey is fantastic, and I think that the mouthfeel and the flavours that you get on the palate are so good. I think we can forgive this one for having a slightly shortish, simple-ish finish. All in all, I think that it's been incredibly smart of Highland Park, who we all know are incredibly good at what they do, incredibly good at blending and marrying whiskies and making whiskey in the first place. And I think that it's a really smart move that they chose to only finish half of this in those Rioja red wine casks. I think that if it had all been finished in the Rioja casks, then a lot of the criticisms that I normally have for red wine finishes might have applied to this. But I think that by doing that clever marrying, they've really got away with it. I think that the presence of those bourbon casks makes it more complex and more balanced. I think that at times the Rioja casks do still dominate, and they do slightly hog centre stage, But overall, I think that those Rioja wine cask finishes, it really complements the Highland Park base spirit really well. It's much better than most red wine cask finishes, and I think that this Highland Park 16-year-old Twisted Tattoo is an excellent alternative to Longrow Red if you can get it. As for a grade, I'm going to go with an easy B+ on this one, tempted to go higher. If I was going to start splitting it down into subcategories, I'd go as high as a B++ on this one. It's really creeping towards low A territory. I'd say that this Highland Park is better than the cask strength release from Highland Park. I probably even like it a little bit more than the Highland Park 15-year-old that I reviewed recently, and I think a lot of that is because of the higher ABV in the presentation of this one, even though I think that I probably do slightly prefer the more straightforward presentation of the Highland Park 15. I think that if this and the Highland Park 15-year-old were both bottled at, say, 50%, it would be an incredibly close call. As for this one, though, I really like it. I really like that it's Highland Park through and through from start to finish, and I might actually be tempted to go and stock up, get another bottle to put on the shelf. So hopefully you've enjoyed watching this review. Let me know what you think of this one if you've had it, and let me know what alternatives you have to Longrow Red and Springbank and all of those Springbank whiskies, because it doesn't look like the availability problems are going to sort themselves out anytime soon, and I think at this point we've got no choice but to start looking elsewhere to fill that gap. Thanks for watching. Cheers.